there's a grief and a loss, and I don't understand it because hopefully you have a lovely adopted home. And two things can be true at once. You can be grateful for having been adopted into a nice home and traumatized by having been adopted and all that you lost. And without recognizing that, you can't talk about it. And you feel different. You feel odd. You're very sad. You've lost something. You feel empty and you can't explain it. You don't know why.
Welcome to Inspired Choice today. I'm Caroline Biesalski and I'm thrilled to have you here. On this show, we go beyond the ordinary, diving into the stories of remarkable individuals from around the globe, leaders, entrepreneurs, authors, and creatives who have made bold choices to pursue their passions. Each guest on Inspired Choice today has a unique journey to share, filled with insights, breakthroughs, and lessons that inspire and uplift. My goal is to bring you real conversations that fuel your own journey, whether you're seeking personal growth, business wisdom, or simply a spark of inspiration to say yes to your own dreams. Thank you for joining us on this journey of transformation and purpose. Now, let's get into today's inspiring interview. Hello and welcome, Inspired Podcast community. This is your new episode. My name is Caroline and my today's guest is Janet Sherlund. And I'm so happy that you said yes to our interview today. How are you doing?
Fine, and my pleasure. Thank you for having me here.
Thank you, and I would love to introduce you to the audience, of course. You are a graduate. You have to help me with the name of your university. Is it Colgate?
Yes, Colgate.
Colgate University, and you spent much of your life serving on non-profit boards focused on education, health, and the arts. Your most significant life event, being given up for adoption at birth, led to a lifelong journey of seeking belonging and self-identity. Your memoir, Abundant at Birth, shares this journey, raising awareness about the deep-rooted grief and loss that comes with adoption, and why love alone is not enough to heal that trauma. You currently resides on the island of Nantucket, Massachusetts, and I hope I pronounced this island right. You know, I have difficulties with names.
That's how you do very well. I'm impressed. And you said Nantucket exactly correct.
Oh, thank you so much. I have to train more in advance, but this is all about you today. And of course, I'm so happy that you are here. And I have a first question for you.
Sure.
Abandoned at Birth delves deeply into your personal experiences with adoption. What motivated you to write your memoir, and what do you hope readers gain from your story?
I wanted to try and allow readers to feel what it feels like to be adopted, to not just hear the storyline behind it, which I think most people understand how adoption works, but those of us who are adoptees, it's not the same sort of fairy tale story that often adoptive parents or the profession paints it to be. And so I really had a lifelong quest to somehow share with people, what does it feel like to be raised by people who are really strangers, who you were placed with as an infant, you had no knowledge of them, and everything about your past and your heritage and people that mirrored you and shared blood with you was erased from your life. And it was just very, very important to me to try and communicate the feelings behind that, the emptiness, the grief, the loss, because adoption is not always just a happy story or happy ending. And I hoped to, one, affirm the experience for other adoptees, but also to educate non-adoptees on the reality of it so that hopefully we could do it better going forward.
Yeah, I see. It's like it's about building bridges, right? Of communication, and that we understand your feelings. You are the example in the book, and memoir. You wrote your story. It's autobiographical, one can say, right?
Yes, absolutely.
Mhm. Wow. Yeah, let's see what my next question may be. You emphasize that it takes more than love to survive the trauma of adoption. Can you elaborate on what additional support or healing is necessary for adoptees?
Thank you. Yes, it's an important question because love is not enough. And I think most of us could accept a child who came to us and needed to be loved and raised, and we would give it all our heart and give it all our love and really think that we had done the best we could and that that's what they needed to be a healthy and happy integrated person. Unfortunately, it's what that child or that individual has lost and left behind and doesn't perhaps know about themselves. For those of us adopted in the United States in the 1950s, 60s, and 70s, adoptions were fully closed. The records were all sealed, and none of us knew anything about where we came from, what our origin story was, why we were given up, what our ethnic identity was in many cases. And that's a very frightening way to grow up. In order for normal childhood development to go well, you need to see yourself mirrored in your family. You need to see other people who move like you and talk like you and walk like you and maybe share a sense of humor. And you also have this genealogical understanding of your history and your heritage. You come from a long line of people who have you share their DNA. And when you don't have that information, they have created a term for that called genealogical bewilderment. And that loss and that feeling of being alone and untethered and the difficulty in trying to piece yourself together creates an individual who's really struggling. And what we need in adoption is for adoptive parents to fully understand and recognize that they are raising someone else's child, and that child comes to them with their looks and their interests and their mannerisms and their behaviors just innately embedded in their DNA. And I think they need to be recognized as good, intact, valuable people. They need to recognize that child's origins and who they are outside of the adopted home. That they were biologically formed with a heritage that needs to be recognized and respected and allowed to flourish within the adopted home.
Oh, I understand. So would you say it feels like being cut off from the roots?
Yes, so that's a very good way to put it. You have no roots. And, when I was little, sometimes friends would say, "Oh, I don't look like my parents," or "I don't care about the things my parents do. That's not important." But it's only not important if you have it. If you don't have it, there's nothing to even push back against. There's no way to say, "Well, I'm not like them, thus I'm this." There's literally nothing to grab onto, and you're just kind of flailing out there. And you also don't understand there's this deep sorrow in me. There's a grief and a loss, and I don't understand it because hopefully you have a lovely adopted home. And two things can be true at once. You can be grateful for having been adopted into a nice home and traumatized by having been adopted and all that you lost. And without recognizing that, you can't talk about it and you feel different, you feel odd, you're very sad, you've lost something, you feel empty, and you can't explain it. You don't know why. And that's the sadness and the sorrow and the grief and the trauma of adoption that we need to recognize in order to bring it to the front and talk about it. In the United States, adoptees have at least 4 times the suicide rate than the other population has. And in fact, people think it may be many more times higher than that, as well as they're very overrepresented in hospitalizations for addiction and mental health. So this is a real trauma that I was hoping that writing my book would help open conversations and let us talk about why it's so important to know where you came from and who you were, what your authentic identity is.
Yeah, so it's a serious topic. I see. I never thought of it that way. Of course, you talked about, yeah, when I said in the beginning, it's like being cut off. I thought I had the image of a flower. you are a flower, a beautiful flower, but you are cut off, but you are still a flower, And then I thought about yeah, it is. And then you have all those heritage, so to say. You talked about DNA, and you don't know where it comes from, and there's no one to ask. You cannot ask because, or you can ask, but there's no answer. Because they don't know, and you don't know where it comes from. And then you talked about gratitude, and yeah, you have to be grateful for being adopted as well. And then at the same time, there's another feeling, but I think also about expectations. Maybe some of the adopters, what is the word, the parents, they expect you to be grateful, and then you are not, because you and then you have feelings of guilt also, because you cannot deliver what is expected from
Well,
you sometimes.
adoption is one of the only traumas that I'm aware of in our society in which the victim is expected to be grateful.
Mm.
And as I said, there are just two things that can be true at once. I'm very grateful for the adoptive family I grew up in, but I was very traumatized by the lost and disconnected and other feelings, sort of haunting feelings that I had growing up. And one of the big surprises to me when I did, as an adult, meet my biological parents and extended family was how much I was one of them. I mean, I just the physical power of belonging, the seeing yourself, meeting someone that you don't know anything about, but just look into their eyes, and that emptiness is just completely and immediately filled up, and you feel like you've come home, that you are home with your people, and that you are understood, and that you are seen. And that happened each time I met my biological father, and then mother, and siblings. Is this extraordinary physical feeling of belonging and seeing myself mirrored, and I made sense for the first time in my life. Oh, that's why I look like this, because they look like that. And it's just amazed me how physical belonging is, and how much we need that in order to form the sense of ourselves.
Wow, that's very impressive. And I thought about, for the first time you recognized yourself, and you could identify maybe with you called it physical aspect, because of course you can also you can talk to people
Mhm.
at a distance, but it is different to meet in person. We witnessed this, during COVID. There, there was this. We all witnessed this, so maybe this is similar as well. Let's have a look at my next question. How has your experience of being adopted influenced your work on non-profit boards, particularly in areas like education, health, and the arts?
Well, I think that always being adopted influenced everything I did in my life and every choice I made. And it was a driving force in me to learn more about it. I was trying to figure it out. What's wrong? What do I feel? What is this? And I read everything I could get my hands on, and I studied things in college. And I was just hungry to try and find the answer. And so that, in some of the choices I made for nonprofit work, whether it was supporting mental health or other illness, or education, even in funding programs for mental health support at my university, and those really trying to really having lived through some very terrifying experiences of panic and anxiety as a child, and this feeling of grief and loss, and really wanting to help in whatever way I could to really to mental health, and thus, and I also say physical health, because I think they're often hand in hand. But yes, being adopted influenced and directed almost everything I did in my life.
Wow. So you would say, and you talked about decisions, you talked about choices. You would say all your decisions were based on the fact that you were adopted?
Well, it was how I was either successfully or not successfully integrating that. So I, as a child, the chronic stress that I lived under from this just weird, strange feeling of loss and being disconnected, not really belonging, and feelings of abandonment and rejection. Why was I given away? Why did someone not want me? Why am I here with this house? I could be in any other house. It just, um, life was very capricious and it was scary. And many adoptees struggle with those issues of separation and loss and trust and rejection. And so one of the ways my body expressed that chronic anxiety was in terrible panic attacks. And I mean terrible panic attacks, frightening, devastating panic attacks that started when I was about 11 or 12. And so that kind of thing really, like, I couldn't make decisions to go someplace or do something that would frighten me. I was really held back by my fears and the expression of that fear through my body. And I think in so many ways, the anguish that I lived with really hindered my personal growth. And it took many, many years and much reading and understanding and therapy and good counseling before I could break free of some of those weights that I really had pulling me down.
Mhm. I understand. I also had the word in mind, attachment. You talked about trust and yeah, how about attachment to your new family, so to say?
Yeah, absolutely. There can be a lot of issues about attachment and intimacy. And again, sometimes if no one's ever talked about that with you, you don't know, you just think something's wrong with me. What am I lacking or I'm missing, or why aren't I feeling what I think I should be feeling here? And it's such a relief to find out that you're not alone in this and that this is very common among people who have lived the same experience you had. And that way you can understand yourself and you can move through things. You can work on them and get help for them. But they have to be recognized. They have to be talked about first so that you address them.
Wow, yes. That you said something. Yes, you are not alone, and this is so important as a message as well. Now, the subtitle of this podcast is Stories of Change and Success. What would you say? What is the thing that has to be changed in order to improve? You know what I mean?
Yeah,
Yes.
I think I think I think honesty and openness. And I think in the adoption constellation, we need to be honest. We need to be honest about what birth mothers experience and the pain of relinquishment for them, and how the political world even is influencing and trying to influence the decisions they make. We have to educate adoptive parents to understand they're not going to feel the same as they might have with a biological child, that this child is other than them and different. And there are going to be missed beats or feelings that you don't quite understand that are normal for this situation. It doesn't mean that you're not a good parent or your child doesn't love you. It's just normal for this situation. And the adoptee has to have all these range of emotions talked about and open, and they have to have their family of origin and their authentic identity recognized and valued and not hidden shamefully. And I think the more we talk about what all aspects and everyone involved in this is feeling, then we can help them work through it. And I found that knowledge, reading, knowledge, and then lots of therapy and counseling to help me work through these was what gave me the strength. And also I persistence. I was determined to get to the bottom of why I felt like I did and what was going on, and find an answer for myself about who I was. And so I think those things really helped heal what was just an overwhelming difficulty and struggle in my life.
Wow, that was great. Thank you so much for sharing. And this was as well why you wrote your book, right? So you received all the answers, and now you can share with others, not only your answers, but what you found out is the best way to communicate, to be honest. You said this as well. Thank you so much. And when people reach out to you now after listening to this episode, where can we find you? And do you have last message to the audience?
Thank you. Well, I'd say that my message would be trust yourself. And when something's not right, believe in yourself and find someone who will help you figure it it out. And yes, I can be found. I have a website, abandonedatbirthbook.com. And on Instagram, I'm at Janet Sherlund Official.
Oh, I love that. I'm so inspired by our interview now. Thank you again for saying yes.
Thank you for our conversation. I appreciate it.
Thank you, and see you in the next episode.
Thank you.
Thank you for tuning in to the Inspired Choice Today podcast. We hope you found today's conversation as enriching as we did. If you're feeling inspired and ready to take the next step in your own journey, I'd love to offer you a free 20-minute consultation. This is a chance to explore any challenges you're facing, get clarity on your goals, or just connect and discuss where you want to go next. Reach out to me directly to schedule your consultation. I'd be honored to support you on your path. And don't forget to subscribe so you never miss a new episode filled with inspiration, insights, and powerful stories. Until next time, keep making those inspired choices every day.